Welcome into the official. Tonight, we have got a live correspondent out at the Elite 11 finals. That will be awesome to hear from what he's seen firsthand account, what's going on over there. We're going to talk about recent commits. Texas has had a flurry of commitments, obviously, in the aftermath of Arch Manning, and then also answer the mailbag questions from last week. So, this is the official. Welcome in. Looks like we got the whole team here, Matt and David, live from California, I believe, at the Elite 11 finals. So glad you're out there. Before we get started, if you have not checked it out yet, go to our mother website, campus2canton.com, and check out all the good things we've got going on there. If you have never been there before, we have all the things you need for college fantasy football, for NFL side fantasy football, and also, obviously, because of what we're doing with this show, we're digging into recruiting, looking forward to the 2023 class at the moment. So, Matt and David, we all want to know what's going on at the finals. I think the first thing to do would just be to talk about that because that's what's first on our minds.
Yeah, so day one was a lot of work. It was just a big workout of all 20 quarterbacks. They were grouped up. I think it was 3 or 4 different groups. Very similar to like how the regional setup was. Doing a lot of the same type of drills, a lot of red zone stuff, outside the pocket stuff. But as far as like my takeaways, for me, like I was actually worried about not like Dante Moore as much. Like he was my quarterback one going into it. And I left after day one, like feeling even better about it, feeling more confident about it. I got a first account at his arm strength, and he looks like he has a pretty strong arm to me. I don't think it's going to hinder him at all. The final question for him is like his mobility, but we're not going to really learn much about that here. Maybe we'll learn more about that like his senior year on his game film. But his arm strength was good. He was accurate. I like that he doesn't get nervous. Like he just seems so cool and calm, and like the moment doesn't get to him at all. Like this is a highly competitive environment, and he just seems so comfortable. So that's I love that about him. That was one of the reasons I think he's got like the best it factor, if you want to call it, for me. So Dante Moore definitely stood out to me. He's still my quarterback one. Malachi Nelson, I mean, he's just always solid. Like every time I see him, this is the second time I saw him live. It's the same thing. He's just super consistent. His ball placement is like pretty pinpoint. Like his arm doesn't like jump out completely, but it's like good enough for sure. And then as far as like a guy that surprised me the most, I would say, was probably Marcus. It's because I didn't like his game film very much. He's just kind of very erratic and all that. And I didn't think this like environment would be very good for him, but he actually showed off a pretty good arm, like a strong arm, and he was really slick in the red zone drills. Like he would move, he was just very fluid mover, and he had really good ball placement. Like he'd throw like especially his passes to like Deuce Robinson and some of these other taller receivers. He really got the ball elevated up in the air, so only his receiver could get it. So that was a little bit surprising. So maybe his stock is on the rise. That was definitely the biggest surprise. One guy who kind of like disappointed me, I would say, is Eli Holstein. Like I can't get over his mechanics. I just can't get over it. And I know a lot of the coaches were working with him. So I think that's definitely an emphasis for him going forward. And I assume Alabama thinks that they can help him with that because he needs to shorten his motion because it's a huge windup. And I mean, he's got the powerful arm and he's got a lot of other attributes that you want in a quarterback, but that's like a non-starter for me still right now. And just seeing him again in person, I was just like, I can't do it with him. But those are the main takeaways so far for me.
Yeah, I feel the same about Holstein, and frankly, you mentioned Alabama, and their must think that they can fix it, which is interesting because I did just put out a short little video today about Jermaine Burton saying, hey, they handpicked Burton despite his lack of production so far. They must think he can come in and be a star for them. And yet I'm not willing to do that with Holstein. I'm like, he's just not great. I just don't like him that much. But you're right. I mean, if Bama says, come on down, you got to figure they see some tools that are worth working with. Matt, does that all sound pretty consistent with your feelings about some of those high-end quarterbacks?
Yeah, I don't think there's too many huge surprises there. Like with a guy like Stokes, it's nice and all, but like he's going to Penn State and he's probably not going to start for 3 years. So
That's right. I mean, he's going to be
unless he transfers out, of course.
Yeah.
But so it's just you'd like to hear more from did you hear much about Malachi Singleton? I feel like he didn't really get talked about much. It sounds like he had a pretty average day though.
Yeah, I don't think this is the setting for him. Like it's just he can't really show off his athleticism in a lot of these drills. Like a little bit, like rolling out and stuff, but he's just not that good of a thrower. Like the guys that you would expect to do this kind of are doing well, like Austin Novosad, and there's a lot of buzz. There's a ton of buzz around Jackson Arnold right now. He had a really good day too. So those guys, I was going to mention them. Those are definitely guys that did really well. I kind of expected them to do really well. They would have been my dark horse type picks or whatever, but Singleton and other guys like I guess Chris Carson. Yeah, he won that one competition towards the end of the day there.
What was it? The rail shot contest.
Yeah, the rail shot.
25-yard outs.
Yep. So he did well in that. So but like other guys like Rickie Collins, like I don't know, he's got kind of a long windup. I didn't love that, but he's certainly athletic. Like he's got a really athletic body. He's pretty impressive in person. So there's definitely potential there. But yeah, some guys just like this setting might not, it might not be the best for them. And I think Singleton's one of those guys.
Yeah, Collins, I really like. I was actually sat down the other night to watch a full game from Collins. Happened to be one of his better games. It wasn't even intentional, but he had like 5 touchdown passes. They ran a very big, wide open air raid, zero set, with him just in the backfield every time. And but I liked a lot of things, but I saw the same thing you did with his motion, which it's a big thing for me. I don't like those big windups, but he was accurate. He has a strong arm, good placement, and he's way more athletic than I thought, honestly. Like he's legitimately a dual threat, speedy guy. So we'll see what happens with Collins. I was hoping to hear his name a little bit, but you said he kind of blended in.
Yeah, I heard he had some placement issues, kind of like had Rashada did as well.
Okay.
Yep, similar thing there. I thought the same thing about Avery Johnson's getting a lot of love right now, and he's our guy. He was hit or miss for me, in like some of the red zone stuff, like his ball play. I don't know. I doubt he doesn't seem like a guy that would get nervous, but I think it just took him a while to get comfortable.
Yeah, that's what I read something about that too.
Because he was spraying some passes, like through the back of the end zone and stuff. But once in a while, he has one of those throws. You're like, oh yeah, this dude's gonna be it. So like, I'm excited to see him on day 2 to see if he can stay consistent.
Yeah, the pro day will be interesting. That's what you said is happening tonight when you head out from this show, right?
Yeah, and I assume it's just like the NFL where it's going to be a bunch of scripted passes. So we're going to get a really good look, and there's going to be a lot of pressure on these quarterbacks to make all the throws. So all eyes are going to be on one dude, and they're going to have to make all these throws. There's going to be a lot of pressure. It'll be interesting to see.
That's awesome. I'm so glad you made it out there.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I want to just start the show off with that because that's super exciting. Out of all of us at C2C, you're the only one repping us, so I appreciate you making the trip. We do have 2 mailbag questions from last week we weren't able to get to. One from Mr. Mile High in our Discord, and the question was, how do you determine the proper weight to give high school competition and or stats. So, Matt, you're doing the models out there, specifically worked a lot on your wide receiver model. How do you decide to weight different things, when we're looking at these players?
Yeah, so that's something that comes with running a database yourself, is that you don't arbitrarily weigh things. You run it through a multiple regression. It'll tell you how much each of these things matter to hit a certain predicted outcome.
Mm-hmm.
So it really, you just plug the numbers in and the computer tells you how much it matters. That's pretty much the end of
it. Between those two things, high school competition, which I guess a surrogate we've kind of used is enrollment size of school
and strength of schedule
and strength of okay, yeah. And so those are two parts of the two parts of the equation there, and then comp or stats themselves. Which one of those is more important? What have you seen is kind of the heaviest weight when you put it in the model?
Yeah, so for just production metrics, fantasy points per game is pretty much the single most predictive for production stats. Okay. And there really isn't anything that close to it. Like market share stats, they don't really add up to much. Yards per team pass attempt doesn't really do too much. It's hard finding production that matters for wide receivers in high school. So it's just the grand summation of fantasy points per game. It's nice and easy. So.
Yeah. And then one thing we like that does have a little bit of weight to it, although not a ton, is I'll just add in, because it's kind of my thing that I like to talk about all the time, but it's a special teams, punt returning, kick returning. We want to see guys that are used all over the field in a lot of different ways, not simply a one trick pony kind of thing. So we love special teams, and we did find isolating out even special teams production was kind of an additional, bonus points, so to speak. So that matters to us.
Mm-hmm. And the running back model I've actually been working on a little bit. And for that right now, it's looking like receiving market share, yards per carry over the team average, and then just total fantasy points per game again, or the three I'm currently looking at to use in my production scores.
Awesome. So you're taking yards per carry over average for high school stats?
No, over average for the team as a whole. So how many more yards per carry are they getting compared to their teammates?
Right, but for high school.
Yes.
I mean, I love it. That's incredible. No one's doing that. That's just I love bragging on what things you guys are doing that nobody else is doing. So that's awesome. Yeah, we'll be excited when that running back model is a little more ready for prime time. I know we feel pretty good about the wide receiver model. I know you're working on the running backs. And then the other question here is a question that's a little bit more of like a big picture question about, there's been rumors of highlight tapes being manipulated. Should there be concern towards if you see a tape and it looks like it's sped up, artificially making a guy look faster? This is from the Riddler in our Discord as well. And so he said, what should we do if we think a tape has been manipulated? And Matt and I, you talked about this last week off air, and then we didn't get to it on air. But I think basically it's a non-issue, at least at this point. When you watch these tapes, you can tell if a guy looks a little bit too fast for reality. Another thing you can do is the whole thing has to be sped up. So if you think everybody else is also running faster than you would expect, it's probably because it's, maybe sped up. And so I wouldn't worry that much about it. You can always put that, feather in your cap and say, I think this was artificial.
It just wouldn't be worth it for a crew to do it, because you get caught so quick, and you're sending this tape out to actual coaches who are going to be like, okay, you're obviously a liar. And a lot of times it isn't even the player cutting up the tape and, putting it all together for huddle. A lot of times they'll have like someone who's like working on that for school, and they'll be like their buddy who's into like, doing video editing, send it to him and be like, hey, can you make me a tape? Stuff like that. So it's just, it's feasible. Somebody could wind up the tape a little faster, but it wouldn't be worth it. It would be really obvious because, the players, the camera shake, just normal people walking on the sideline. Even if you increase it like 0.1% faster, it's very obvious. So
Yeah, I
it's
think
just
that's a
not
really
worth
good point
it.
too about how it would reflect, to coaches who are looking to bring you into their program. And if it looks like you're putting lies on tape, basically, that's not going to go well for you. So
Mhm.
I think you're
And
right.
also, one more thing is the teams aren't getting mile per hour times the way that we are and the way that recruiting analytics are. They're getting actual GPS data if they do have it. So
Yeah.
it
So
wouldn't even.
it wouldn't matter. It'd maybe make us think they're a little bit better than they are, but
Yeah, but
the coaches and the
unfair.
colleges aren't going to be duped. So that's a good point. So we're not too worried about that. Now let's move on. We have a lot of commitments to talk about. Actually, normally we do about 4 or 5, and I've got 7 on here this week between last week and this week. Would love to hear some thoughts, David, on the 2 Miami commits. If you've watched them, or no, I'm sorry. Let's do Texas first. The 2 Texas commits. Johntay Cook, I think, was yesterday or today, and Jonah Wilson was recently too. These guys are committing to Texas after Arch Manning commits. Now they're getting wide receivers. This isn't a coincidence. What do you think about these 2 guys?
Yeah, it's like everyone's in a race. All these wide receivers are in a race to commit at Texas. And I just saw today that Jalen Hale apparently was getting some crystal balls to Texas as well. So that's another guy who might join. Jonte Cook, yeah, he's really good. He's gonna definitely be in my top 10, I would think, at the position. I don't know how high he'll get. He's 6 foot, 170, good speed, good flexibility, good mover. A lot like Xavier Worthy, the guy they already have. So it's like, basically he sits behind him for a year or whatever, develops a little bit, and then takes a big role when he leaves. So I like the fit there. And Jonah Wilson, I haven't watched a ton of him yet, but he's got really good size and athleticism from what I've seen, like 6'3", 195, good size. Like he'll probably be like a boundary guy, a red zone threat, that type of thing. I mean, I don't know, stock up Texas, I would say.
I mean, yeah, it's going to be pretty soon in our drafts. It's going to be like, hey, take all the depth chart from Alabama, all the depth chart from Ohio State, and all the depth chart from Texas and USC. Those are going to be the 4 offenses for the next few years. Matt, any thoughts on Texas? And then talk to us about Nathaniel Joseph from Miami, who just committed after Rashada committed. So you see this pattern. You get a high level QB, and then the receivers start pouring in.
Yeah, so with the Texas guys, I think David summed up pretty perfectly there. The only thing with Wilson is I'm worried he might be a guy that just gets left behind on the depth chart because they're just going to keep bringing in more people this class and probably even more next class. So, he's kind of more of going to be in that outside receiver role, maybe filling for like a Nayor when he's done. But I'm much less confident in him being a producer eventually. With Nathaniel Joseph, I think most people thought he was going to end up in Miami. There was rumors about Clemson for a little bit, but he's a Florida guy, and he says he's always been a Canes fan, so it wasn't a huge surprise. And he's a lot like a Zachariah Branch type player. He's really explosive. He's a little bit smaller, slot-only guy, really good returner. He's going to get open pretty easily. Now, I'm still unsure of how CFF oriented that Miami offense is going to end up being, and especially in that slot role, who knows how that ends up. But he should get on the field. He should get some time his freshman year. I don't really love any of the Miami receivers that much, and I especially don't think they have a good slot in particular. So he could come in and produce early.
Yeah, I think his physical traits are pretty impressive. But yeah, again, I mean, unless Miami and Cristobal and Gaddis just put a bunch into the pot and like come up with a brand new recipe, what we've seen historically from some of the people who are in charge of the Miami offense, it may not be very exciting or fruitful for college fantasy. Even though they're gonna keep signing some big names, I think. But it could be like Georgia, where they sign them all for a couple of years and everyone says, "Oh, I'm out. I'm going to transfer," and it doesn't really come to fruition. Jaden Rashada, obviously, big deal. Sunday, he announced he was going to Miami. There was a whole lot of hullabaloo about his, NIL deal and, a bunch of stuff back and forth. It's very dramatic over the next few days. but he's committed solid to Miami. He's out of California, which is kind of an interesting. He really wanted to play in the Southeast. I think he basically all his visits were SEC schools plus Miami, and he just felt really good, I guess, leaving the state of California. I think Miami's bringing him in to like be the guy after Tyler Van Dyke leaves. Although interestingly enough, they have some pretty high level recruits already in Ja'Cory Brown this year coming in. Last year, a guy out of Grayson, his name escapes me right now, but he was a fairly high rated 4-star.
Jake Garcia.
Huh?
Is it Jake Garcia or?
Yeah, Jake Garcia.
Oh, yeah.
He's a pretty high level 4-star. And now Rashada, who I think is like kind of the heir if he wants it, if he can, doesn't screw it up or something. But I think he's got his arm flashes. You're seeing him out there at the Elite 11 finals right now, David. But I think he's more raw than we really let on, in terms of the rankings and the way that he's ranked on all the sites and 5-star or flirting with 5-star status. I'm not sure I see it. I think he's got an arm that really can flash, but he's inconsistent. He's not a really difference-making runner. It's like he's going to have to be perfect with his arm, and I don't see that right now. So it's a little bit like, what are we really hoping for with Rashada? So kind of a work in progress, in my opinion. I watched a game of his, and he had like 3 or 4 delay of games, which were kind of clearly on him, like waiting for plays to come in, some things like that. So we'll tease this. His what do we call it? Maturity index score is not great. And we'll explain that in a future episode when we talk a little bit more about some of these metrics. All right, let's see. Cole Adams to Alabama. I will be honest, I don't know anything about Cole Adams. He's going to Alabama, so he's probably good. He's a wide receiver. Anybody have a take on Cole Adams here?
Yeah, I liked him going in as a sleeper. I think he's 24/7's wide receiver 65 or somewhere around there right now. And he's really fast, which is nice. He's running a 10.6 500 meter. I think I got him just at 21 miles per hour, maybe a tiny bit over. So really good downfield kind of guy. I don't know how much I like him going to Bama. Kind of, his production is going to rely on most of the receivers in the 2022 class just busting. But even if 2 or 3 of them, end up as the starters, then I don't see how Cole Adams ever ends up as a relevant player for Alabama.
He's going to be a situational outside guy probably, but mostly just a special teams. I think he had 4 return touchdowns last year, like three kickoff returns. So I think they probably view him as more of a special teams and situational deep threat guy.
Okay.
But they got 2 dudes, so I don't know how they there.
I mean, if Alabama comes calling, I guess you can't really say no, but he may not be the crown jewel. He's their first 2023 receiver, I think.
Yeah.
I can't think of anybody else.
Yeah, I was going to say they just got a 2024 guy, and they got crystal ball, I think, Malik Benson, who's going to be a 2023 JUCO.
Mm-hmm. Okay. He's about to commit next week, I think.
JUCO guy, yeah.
And he's like a perfect fit for Bama, so that's like another guy to think about. So I don't know.
All right, David, I'm going to give you the floor if you have an opinion to talk first. Cam Williams just announced he is committing to Notre Dame, 2024 receiver. Do you have any thoughts on him yet? I know we haven't dug that deep, but you're a Notre Dame guy, so have you heard anything about him?
Yeah, I heard a lot of buzz about him committing to Notre Dame like the last few weeks. He was at the Irish Invasion camp at Notre Dame recently, and I guess he impressed the coaches a ton, and he got a scholarship offer right away. They like him. He's 6'2", 185. He's very fast already. I don't have a mile per hour on him yet or anything, but from what I heard, he was running in like the sub 4.5 maybe. So that's kind of the same type of guy that they always go for, though. I mean, he's kind of like he's like a Braylon James, probably that type of guy. I did watch some of his film, and Yeah, I mean it's a lot of straight line stuff. I didn't see a whole lot of lateral stuff, but I don't know. He's a sophomore. Um, we'll see how he develops, but he is relatively highly rated, so it's a good get as far as I'm concerned right now.
Yeah, speaking from a UF fan, let me just say it's nice to have 4-stars who commit like years out because they really want to go to your school. So if nothing else, that's fun.
Yeah.
And then the grand finale here, Matt, your guy has announced his college football decision. Justin Marshall to Colorado State. How do you feel about that from a CFF perspective, and then also just as a guy that you've been on going to Colorado State?
Yeah, just for CFF, I mean, that's great. I mean, he could end up being what we all wanted Dante Wright to be, as like, the slot, yak, fast guy. But unfortunately, I don't think he stays at Colorado State. I would be surprised. I think this is just an early commit to drum up a little bit more attention, more credibility to his name, and until he gets more offers. I mean, he was offered from Purdue and Wisconsin. I would much rather see him, especially Purdue. That would have been a great spot for him. But
yeah, actually,
we'll see. At the minimum, though, yeah, he's from Indiana. At the minimum, though, he's still great CFF value. Just I would prefer the higher end spot for Debbie purposes.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think you're right. It definitely crossed my mind when I saw that. I didn't even know he had announced. But yeah, Colorado State. For anyone who's not up to date with what the Rams are doing, they brought in the entire Nevada coaching staff and half the roster, which was in tremendous air raid. Carson Strong, that whole thing from last year is now at Colorado State. They have a different quarterback, of course, but it's going to be an offensive smorgasbord in Fort Collins. So Justin Marshall going there is very exciting. But I agree with you. I think there's a good chance he winds up P5 and, as offers come in throughout this process. All right, you guys. Well, David, I know you got to get out and watch some more high-end QBs. Matt and I are going to go grind some spreadsheets and some film, as we always do. Thanks for being on. Glad you made some time, David. It's really good to have your perspective on the finals. This has been The Official.